Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn, and I know that we've had a lot of graduations lately, whether it's graduations from college and now all the high school graduations have started to happen. And I just started reflecting on things that I've learned throughout my journey since high school and being a college graduate. And obviously, I'm going to look at these from God's perspective, from a spiritual perspective, because I know, and hopefully you know, there's a God-sized shaped hole in all our hearts that only He can fill. And here's what I just want to share some scripture, friends, that have become kind of life verses that I wish I would have known at the age of 18 or 22 more closely. A couple of them I knew, but just didn't really, obviously at that age, could totally implement them in my life. But even though you may be like, well, hey, Greg, it's been a long time since I graduated. I believe somebody listening or watching on our YouTube channel, you need to hear this today too, or maybe share it with a loved one that has graduated recently. The first thing I want to share to graduates is that, you know what, there's going to be things in life that happen that just don't make any kind of sense. And no matter how well you plan, no matter how careful you are, how much you take your time, just sometimes life happens. And yet the good news is that God is with us. The Bible promises God never leaves us. He never forsakes us. In a verse that I heard in college, even though quite often I was far from God, but I showed up on Sunday morning. The other 167 hours was about Greg Horn, but the rest of the week, I'm saying that backwards. I apologize. 1 hour on Sunday I gave to God, but the other 167 hours out of the week was about Greg Horn. But this was a verse I heard my hero Wayne Smith said, and as life has gone on over the past 40 years since I heard him say that, Romans 8:20, it says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him and who've been called according to His purpose. And friends, I want to remind you today that Bible verse doesn't say in Romans 8:28, we know that in some things God works for the good of those who love Him. It doesn't say in most things. It says in all things. And I can truly say that to you today, friends, even though it was over 40 years since I've heard that now for the first time. That is so true. That God will work no matter what's happened in your life for good if you love Him. And He's got a purpose for your one and only life. And it is different for all of us. And that's one of the things we have to be careful. Sometimes we're trying to live out somebody else's purpose. And, you know, when we start getting busy trying to play that compare game, and the enemy loves for us to play the compare game, whether you're a high school or college graduate or whether you're 85 years old and listening to this, we have to be careful about playing that old compare game. Because you know what happens when we play the compare game, right? Number one, whatever measuring stick that we're using, if we measure up better than somebody else in whatever area that is that we're comparing, then pride sets in, and we know that's not God honoring. And remember the Bible verse that talks about, I believe it's in Proverbs, that pride comes before a fall. Or the second thing is when we play that compare game, once again, with whatever measuring stick you're using to see how you measure up with somebody else, and maybe they're doing a little better in that area, whatever it is you're trying to measure, and they're doing better than you are in that area, then self-pity sets in, and we start throwing a pity party. And I'm embarrassed to tell you, I've thrown some pretty good pity parties in my life. And so, friends, we know that's not God-honoring either, to wallow in self-pity, okay? And so be careful about playing that compare game. And no matter what's happened in your life, you can trust and stand on Romans 8:28. Instead of asking God, why did this happen in my life? Ask Him, what can you learn from it? What can you learn from it? Another thing that there'll be a time in your life, a second thing I'd like to share with the graduates this May, early June here, is that Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, 6 is just a verse to help you when just things happen and you're not sure which way to go. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge God, and He will make your path straight. Friends, I can tell you that too, standing on that promise, that sometimes we just can't lean on our own understanding, just like we talked about earlier in Romans 8:28. But we acknowledge God with all our heart, mind, and soul, and we just say, God, you got to show me the way. He will do that. He'll make your path straight. I've been on several detours in my life, some because of unwise decisions I've made, some because of unwise decisions others have made that have impacted me. But you know what? God always gets us back on track, back on the path he has for us when we do seek him and we trust him with all our hearts and we lean on him and not on our own understanding. Sometimes I talked about earlier that Isaiah in Romans 8:28 about all things work together. Well, sometimes when things happen in our life and we don't understand, it doesn't make sense, I want to remind you that Isaiah 55 verses 8 and 9, it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." And, the analogy I like to use is, I'm a big sports fan, and football season, when I'm doing the radio for LCA football games, there's always an offensive coach and a defensive coach up near me. Sometimes they're even above me on top of the roof of the press box, and they're calling down to coaches on the sideline, the head coach, because they have a different vantage point. They are way up above the playing field. And they can share, there's things they're seeing that's going on during the battle on the field during the game that the coaches and players down there can't see. And friends, one day it just really hit me. That's how it is with God. God's looked down on our life in this game of life that we're in. And sometimes we can't see things that God is doing. And yet God's ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. And as high as the heaven is above the earth, so are his thoughts and his ways higher than our ways. And friends, you can trust that. And once again, and I've said it already, but I feel like I need to say it again. Sometimes instead of asking God why, asking what. Instead of saying, God, why did you allow this to happen? Say, God, what do you want me to learn from this? And if you would take time to heal and listen to him and learn, you'll be able to help somebody else with it. Another thing I want to say to our graduates this year is I want to encourage you, and I want to teach you today to be generous. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 2 says, "The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed." Now, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind when we think about generosity is finances. And yes, financial resources and being generous with whatever God's entrusted you with is definitely huge. But there's a lot of things that we can be generous with besides the financial resources that God's entrusted with. My hero Wayne Smith said many years ago, the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasures. We've already talked about the treasures, the money part, but our time, talk about, how do you spell love? It's Time, and that's time with others. And, recently I had a friend that his mother passed away, and it'd been just a grueling time. She had dementia really bad, and this guy was the only child, so, man, he was having to try to check on her and do his job, be a good husband and dad, and it was just really, really tough. Well, she passed away, and I'd been out of town, didn't know about it, and I got back, and then I just had to be checking social media, and I saw something on there about his mom passing away and that the service was that day. And I already had a really jam-packed schedule, but I just feel like the Holy Spirit said, you need to go and be there for your friend. And so I canceled a meeting that I had and just said, hey, I need to go to a funeral that I just found about. And I'm so glad I went, friends. I'm so glad I went. It really, really blessed my friend. Said, I'd never dreamed that you would be here. I know your busy schedule. And yet, friends, I knew that God wanted me there that day. And I'm so thankful that I did that. And by giving some of my time, and friends, we all have it. And yet I know there's only 24 hours a day. And just like me, I'm sure some of you are overextended sometimes with commitments. And yet sometimes there's certain things that are just more important. And I really felt like I needed to be there that day. And it was kind of a private funeral. And so I'm so glad I went, because it gave me some good personal time with my friend. And time is just such a way that we can refresh others. Talent, everybody's got different talents. And I know some people say, I don't have any talent. Well, friends, I want to remind you the talent of a listening ear. The Bible talks about to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. But it's interesting. It says first, be quick to listen. And that is a talent, friends. Oh, that's a talent. I really just asked God to help me be a better listener over the last several years. And I think I've grown in that area. And I can just tell you on the other side, when somebody will listen to me, it's just priceless. It's priceless. I had a good friend that was the best listener I've ever met. And one of the things I've tried to do is check on them occasionally and just say, hey, I know you're an encourager and you're a prayer warrior, but just, I just want to see how I can pray for you and how can I listen to you today. And so if somebody listening today, that's something you could bless somebody with to refresh somebody else, like Proverbs 11:2 says. And just be a good listener. You would be an angel to somebody if you would do that. Here's one of the things that I'd love to say to the graduates today. There's going to be times when life's going to get really, really hard, and you're just going to want to give up. You're just going to give up. And yet, Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 has been a go-to verse many different times in my life when I've gotten weary and wanted to give up. And I really do believe that one of Satan's greatest tools is discouragement. He wants us to give up on our hopes and our dreams. But Galatians 6:9 is one that somebody listening today, you need to write this one down on a Post-it note and place it in several places where you can see it. It says, do not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. And I know somebody listening today, you are weary. You're weary. And friends, I understand. Been there numerous times. And yet, I want to encourage you today, don't give up. There's something that God's planted in your heart, a desire, a dream, a vision. And yet, if you quit, then the enemy wins. And I just want to remind you that, greater is Jesus that is in you than is in the world. In Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Almost out of time here, but I want to share two more verses before we wrap it up of just wisdom for our graduates today, and for even those of us that it's been a long time since we graduated, just good reminders of God's promises. I want to encourage you today to throw the rearview mirror away. I know you're like, throw the rearview mirror away? That's a little dangerous. But I'm talking about looking in the past, friends. I think the enemy, I'm embarrassed how many times I've let him steal from my life because of living in the past or mistakes I've made. I've got this Bible verse. I've got it painted on a canvas, so I see it every day when I walk out of to go into my garage. I've got it hanging on the wall, and it says, I'm still not all I should be, but I'm focusing all my energies on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. That's Philippians chapter 3, verse 13, friends. Somebody listening or watching today on our YouTube channel, you needed to hear that. And then I close out today for our graduates. I hope this is a prayer that you'll read each day. Such just a beautiful prayer. It's simple. It's 3 verses, but it's very, very short. And I want to pray this blessing over all the precious men and women that have graduated this spring. Numbers chapter 6, verse 24 through 26 says, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 through 26. My name's Greg Horn, and this is Hope is Here.